Are you ready to feel the chill of a bone-cold mystery? Welcome to another episode of True Horror Stories, my fellow Slayers. It's freezing outside, but that won't stop us from venturing into the frigid depths of the unknown. The mystery of the disappearing footprints. 2 months ago was the first time it snowed in my area. My daughter was playing in the snow. There was no one else at home. We have dogs that cannot go to the area she exercises. She ran back inside to tell me there were footprints where the dogs couldn't go. I dismissed her and she went back outside and came back. She told me the footprints only go one way, Mama. They just stop, like they appeared and disappeared. No tire tracks. No one was around, just us. It was odd, but I was sure the landlord had come by. Fast forward a few weeks, it snows again, and this time my daughter is gone for the weekend, and my boyfriend and I are home. We were inside all night, and we were in bed after the snow had started. The following day, I noticed footprints on my porch and asked my boyfriend if he had been outside that night. He said no. I asked him to look at the prints, and he walked the entire property. He returned and said the prints just stop. They start and stop, but there is no truck or four-wheeler marked anywhere. It doesn't make sense. My boyfriend and daughter told me the same thing. The prints disappeared. I'm freaked at this point, but I go along. It snows again this week, and just like all the other times, I wake up in the morning. My boyfriend is still asleep, and I notice footprints on my porch in the same area as the last time. There are Nest cameras all over the house. I can see every direction. I took pictures this time, and I also took pictures of my boyfriend still in bed asleep. The snow started, and he was up at work until 11 p.m. The majority of the snow had fallen by that time. It had to have happened in the night, as it always has before. He didn't go outside. We checked the cameras, and nothing. I don't understand it, and I can't figure it out. I seem crazy and no one seems to have an answer. What do you think happened? An intruder? Tell us what you think in the comments. The phantom snowplow. It was a few years back in the dead of winter, so one day there was a massive blizzard blanketing my area. It must have snowed 2 feet before the power cut out. I live in a rural area, so this is a common experience. The day wore on into the night, and it looked like we wouldn't get the power back that day. They managed to get it back on early in the morning the next day. But anyways, so I was sitting there on the couch, candles lit. It was around midnight, and as I was reading, I looked up and saw a yellow light strobing across the trees outside and, in some places, through the trees and into the house. It was one of those yellow rotating hazard lights on heavy equipment and snowplows. Now, where my house is located, there's a long driveway that leads up through the trees into a clearing in the forest. I paid no mind to this light as I'd seen them on hundreds of snowplows before and was thankful they were clearing my road. The only odd thing was that from the angle of the light, it was clear that they had driven up my driveway. At this time, it had stopped snowing and I took note of how much snow had fallen by looking out my window onto my deck. I went to sleep, woke up the next day, and was grateful that they managed to get the power back while I was sleeping. I stepped outside with my morning coffee, looked at my deck, and noticed that it hadn't snowed anymore from when I checked it out the night before. I walked off my deck around my house to check the state of my driveway. This was when I was baffled. The driveway was untouched. There were no tracks, nothing. Well, that was creepy. What do you think? Leave your thoughts in the comments. The frozen footprints. This happened about 10 years ago during the winter. We don't smoke in the house, so I'll stand at my sliding glass door smoking instead of going outside when it's really cold. At about 2 a.m., I went to smoke before bed. It was a full moon that night, and the backyard was lit up bright from the reflection of the moon on the fresh snow. I remember looking at my backyard and thinking how nice it looked. I finished my cigarette and went to bed. I had problems sleeping, so at about 7 a.m., I got up and went for another smoke at my sliding glass door, like the night before. I looked at my backyard, and there was a trail of footprints that went from my front yard to the middle of my backyard, to a spot where there was a perfect view of inside my house from my sliding glass door and my back window. So whoever or whatever it was would have a perfect view of my whole living room, my kitchen, and my hallway that leads to the bedrooms and the bathroom. I went outside to look at it, knowing it wasn't anyone in my house because I would have heard them walk past me to leave. Plus, I wasn't really ever asleep too much. I followed it to my backyard, to that spot, and I noticed only a set of footprints going to that spot in my yard. It looked like they stood there and spun around a few times in the spot because a footprint was facing in every direction, but on each other as if standing still and spinning. I went back to follow where the footprints came from, and they started at the end of my driveway as if someone got dropped off, and they walked up my driveway on the left side straight to that spot. But the thing is, there were no tracks from a car, and it had snowed that night, so it would have left prints in the road, but nothing was there, just a footprint that started up my driveway. The shoes appeared to be work boots, but were way too big for anyone I knew. There were no other footprints leading back to the road or anywhere else. It was like they had just disappeared. I also didn't hear anything outside. I should have heard the crunching of the snow because my backyard isn't that big, and it's an old house with drafty windows and thin walls, making it easy to hear stuff outside. Whoa, I won't be looking out the window at night anymore. Feel free to leave your thoughts in the comments. The snowy spring break. This happened near my house in a small town about an hour north of Indianapolis. I was in 8th grade at the time, and it was during my spring break. That year, instead of sunshine and warm weather for spring break, there was a snowstorm. My two friends, my two younger brothers, and I decided to make the best of it and just play in the snow for the day. There were woods near my house, not huge but big enough to hike around for a few hours, so we decided to do just that. About an hour into the hike, we stumbled on what looked like an old well, a stone circle partially filled with foul-smelling, half-frozen water. We threw a few rocks into it and stuck long tree branches into it and tried to find out how deep it was. We tried with a branch that was at least 20 feet long, but we never were able to hit bottom, so it was pretty deep. Now, the well by itself wasn't really creepy, but how old it looked and how it was just stuck out in the middle of the woods was a little unnerving. The part that really terrified us came about 20 minutes after discovering the well. We had decided that we were done messing around with the well and had just started to continue into the woods when we all heard something that made us freeze dead in our tracks with fear. Echoing through the woods came a loud, shrieking laugh. It was a high-pitched, grating voice that was still very loud despite seeming like it came from somewhat far away. We all just froze for a moment, trying to make sense of what we just heard. The laugh came again, this time distinctly closer to us, but still not in our immediate vicinity. At that moment, none of us saying a word, we bolted back the way we came, away from the sound, in the direction of my house. We didn't stop running for what seemed like forever, and we eventually made it back to my house without any more incidents. None of us had a clue as to what we'd just heard, and none of us was ever brave enough to go back out there to try and figure it out. Well, that was terrifying. What do you think was in the well? Leave a comment and let us know. The hitchhiker in the snow. One winter, when I was in my early teens, my mother and I drove to the grocery store during a snowstorm to shop for food and other items. The snowstorm had dumped a lot of snow overnight, so we made our purchases and immediately left for home. We left early and were returning in the early afternoon. The 35 minutes the drive would normally take took about 45 minutes, but the road was snow-packed and no other cars were on the road. The wind was drifting the snow over the road, leaving a white plain where the road would have been. My mother drove well below the speed limit to drive through drifting snow and not skid off the road. We were at the midpoint of the drive and had just passed my uncle's house. We didn't stop as my mother didn't want to get stuck overnight due to the deteriorating road conditions, so we pressed on. Just past my uncle's house, the road goes over a hill with a long, gentle descent on the other side. The snow fell lightly, and the wind died down, but the road was covered. Only a long white path lay ahead of us. No tire marks were on either lane, as there was no other cars on the road. As we descended the hill, my mother noticed something on the road, so she began to slow the car to a crawl. At first, I thought it was a log or wood lying across the road. As we came closer, my mother and I noticed it was a man lying across the road. He was wearing a short-sleeved white t-shirt and jeans with white-black boots. He was lying face up with arms spread out from his sides and legs together. His eyes were closed as he was just lying on the snow. My mother gradually stopped the car and we stared at the man. Slowly, she backed up the car and managed to turn around. She said she wanted to go get my uncle for help. Slowly, we made our way back over the hill and my mother pulled into my uncle's driveway. She got out and went into the house. Soon, my mother appeared with my uncle, who was carrying a blanket and other items. We got in and we turned around and started over the hill. No other car had passed us, and the light was good, as it was still early. My uncle was concerned, wondering if the man was hitchhiking and had been run over by hypothermia. As we drove over the hill, my uncle leaned far forward near the windshield, trying to see the man. As we approached where we stopped, we could see the man was no longer lying on the road. There was nothing. The snow behind our tracks was untouched. We could see our tire tracks where we stopped and where my mother turned around. But beyond, the snow on the road was untouched. No car tracks, no animal tracks, no footprints. My uncle got out of the car saying maybe the man rolled into the ditch or walked after us. He began to search the road and both ditches, but found nothing. He returned to the car and told my mom to continue into town as he watched the ditches. Slowly, we drove into town but never saw any cars on the road or any marks on the side of the road. The man just disappeared. My uncle told my mom to go to the police so he could report it and then maybe get a ride back to his place with one of the patrolmen. My mother and I both reported the incident and we returned home. Where did the man go? Was there even a man there? What do you think? Let us know. That's it for today's True Snowy Tales. Let us know what more scary stories you'd like to hear next and share your experiences in the comment section. See y'all next time, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more slaying content.